Hey module makers, I'm David, the creative director of Modulus. Welcome to Modulus Academy, where I give you my top tips for peak optimization. So today we're going to talk about something very specific, which is more focused on logistics, I would say, and organizing your factory. So to explain a concept, I've added a dye mixer down here, which is effectively making blue paint. So at the start of your factory, this will probably be the way to go because you're not producing that much yet, and one mixer can just take in the stuff you're building. But as you progress through the game, you will start producing much more resources, and you have to kind of start setting up arrays of these operators, because as you can see, this only takes in 7.5 of each resource, and I'm producing way more. So then a logistics problem arises, right? How do you split all of this up into all the different operators so you can actually make use of all that excess resources? Because I could make way more paint here. So I've added some spawners here to illustrate the setup. So here I'm effectively using 30 per minute for both resources, and I'm outputting 60 per minute. So everything is working optimal. It's just not the prettiest sight to look at. You know, when you start making these kinds of builds, eventually it's gonna take a lot of space up, and it's not that aesthetically pleasing. I'm gonna show you some possible approaches on how to clean this up a bit more, although it's working and it's perfectly fine to use it like that. But if you are talking about organizing your factories, there's some different ways of approaching it. So let me go over to another island, and here I will show you my first approach, which still takes up quite some space, but it's already easier and cleaner to understand. So this is kind of like the angular approach, I would call it, where one of the resources comes from the north or vertical, and the other one comes in a horizontal way inside. So here you can see that my pigment is being split off in the horizontal lines, and the oil is split off in my vertical lines, which it makes it easier to understand when you're looking at it. It's easier to debug, basically. So yeah, this is an approach that's a bit cleaner, but still takes up a lot of space. So I'll show you another one, and this is kind of like a sequential approach, where we're using splitters, and the extra resources will automatically be sent through the next lane. So what happens here is that I'm just splitting this whole belt in two, and you would think that half of it goes through the next belt and then is used here, so that this machine would end up with not enough resources. That's actually not true. So what happens is 50% will try to be split off in this output, but as the machine is slow, it will block the input. So when the splitter has a blocked input, it will just send it through its other output. So basically what's happening here is, if I know I'm producing 30 oil per minute and I'm consuming 7.5, I will need 4 dye mixers for the oil and for the pigment. So what happens here is, if you have 30 on the belt, this belt will be perfectly consumed, because whenever an output of the splitter is blocked, it will just go to the next part until everything is consumed. The same goes for the pigment. So basically I'm just using some splitters here on the outsides, and I have a nice clean setup of my two different materials being inputted. So we have a constant flow forward and a split off every time a machine needs it. And the way I handle the outputs is basically with a little tunnel underneath it, and then collecting it here very cleanly on a belt. So 2 resources coming in and 1 resource coming out. Very easy to understand, also very easy to duplicate and place somewhere else if you need double the amount, for example. Very handy. And then I have some alternative setups of the same mechanic, basically. So this is kind of using a bit less vertical space, as I'm not using the tunnels here. I'm just using my tunnels in a different way. So, but it's the same concept. Also very easy to understand, very efficient to copy and paste if you need more somewhere else in your factory. And then you can push it even further. This one, I even made that 4 high. So it's also a different setup, same concept. But what's happening here is that, of course, yeah, the whole production line is a bit longer, of course, because I'm using more space in the length of the production line. So yeah, it's kind of up to you what you want to make. These could be handy to squeeze somewhere in a narrow corridor, for example, but these could be copy pasted easily and just made into like many of them next to one another. But you can also go completely bonkers with this, and I've just set up an experimental design here to show you what's possible. I just really like the fact that the 4 dye mixers here are just pushing paint to the middle of the conveyor belt, or to the middle of the whole production design. I don't know, it looks cool, but it's not particularly easier to read or more efficient or something like that. But it's just to show you that you basically can experiment in many ways to come up with a perfect system for splitting resources across slow operators. So there you go. But I hope you learned something today. Hope you had fun. And I can't wait to see what you come up with if you experiment with this kind of setups. That's a wrap for this episode of Modulus Academy. Make sure you're following us so you don't miss the next one. See you on the factory floor.